of race formation and diversity, inshallah. So we could just give them an undivided attention.
Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد خير الأولين والآخرين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم زدنا ولا تنقصنا واكرمنا ولا تهنا واعطنا ولا تحرمنا واثرنا ولا تؤثر علينا وارض عنا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. It's an honor to be here in your presence, and I really do appreciate you all taking the time to come out to at least say bear with me as I try to deal with this particular topic, which has been titled "An Islamic View of Race and Formation and Diversity." Actually, on the website, it actually says the Islamic view on race, formation, and diversity. And I purposely did not call it the Islamic view because I guess many Muslims, when they would see that, they would say, "Oh, really? You know, there is the Islamic view on race and diversity." I haven't learned that. I've been Muslim for how many years? I still don't know what Islam has to say about race, formation, and diversity. And so maybe I should come to learn this. But what we do know of the Islamic view of race, formation, and diversity is that all of us originate from Adam alayhi salam. That is the Islamic view. That's the extent that we can be certain of, that all of us originate from one single soul, which of course was split into two, and from those two the world was populated. And so there is a certain degree of truth to saying the Islamic view on race formation and diversity. But on the other hand, there are these mysteries that do exist, or this one particular mystery that does exist amongst the human race, we would say, with regard to how we got to where we are today. This particular topic is a type of topic which, if any person were to deal with it, naturally you would find some degree of resistance, because there are always these sort of assumptions about what the topic is going to be about. That the topic is not about racism, is what I would say race itself first and foremost. But of course there's a certain overlap between race and racism that I do want to deal with. This particular topic is rooted in that same old issue that continues to appear over and over throughout our lives, and that is the matter of identity. You know, so many people, or all people, have sort of a multi-layer of identity. That a person could be, of course, you're a man, plus you're a Muslim, plus you are a black or African American or Negro, whatever you want to call yourself. You know, which actually itself shows a sort of search for identity. Or a woman, she's a Muslim, and she's also Indo-Pakistani, or she's an Arab, but she's also a woman, she's also a mother, she's also a daughter. You know, that there are different layers to all people's identity. And so to speak and study the subject of race identity is another aspect of that sort of search for identity. Who are we? You know, who are we as a people? How did we get here? Of course, that is one of those pressing questions as well that the average one of us has once we enter into the age of distinction. We start to ask certain questions about how did I get here, who my creator is, all of us. Because that's part of the fitrah. We have been reminded of a meeting that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prior to our current existence, a type of meaning that none of us, I would imagine, can claim to recall. But the Quran tells us of this meeting when Allah had took from the back of Adam all of his progeny and made us testify against ourselves, asking us, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And we responded, Bala, indeed you are. And then Allah says after that, أَن تَقُولُوا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ إِنَّا كُنَّا عَنْ هَذَا غَافِلِينَ. So that you could not say on the day of resurrection that we had no knowledge of this, that we're heedless of this. But we really can't remember at the moment. When that happened, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this happened, and so that's because of our fitrah, and that because of that meeting, once we grow, we eventually start to have those type of questions about how did I get here? Who brought me here? Who created me? Is there some expectation that that Creator has of me? And then also another important question is, who am I? Of course, with relationship to other beings and other creatures on the planet. And so, the question of what is race is a very important question, because for some, race is a biological fact, right? Average one of us probably would say, well, yeah, it's something real. That a Chinese person is different from an African, right? Or a Russian or Georgian person is different from one from Sri Lanka. That there's something biologically different about us, or at least phenotypically, if not genetically, there's something phenotypically about us that's different that makes us, or makes it possible for us to identify as being a race of people. On the other hand, there's a theory that says that, well, no, race is a social construction. And so this is important to me because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the book, gave us the Quran, and He said in this Quran that He is the friend of those who believe. He brings them out of darknesses into the light. Which fundamentally means that even after becoming a Muslim, that a person can remain in darkness after becoming a Muslim, or in darknesses, or shades of darknesses, veils of darknesses from the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person was a drunkard yesterday, or a crack addict yesterday, and they became Muslim last night, and they're here with us today, the person is a Muslim, yes, but the person can't claim to be no longer a drug addict or an alcoholic. You still are an alcoholic. You still are a drug addict. You see, and so in dealing with the issues of race, there's some Muslims who have this idea that the Muslims shouldn't talk about race. Why? Because the roots of racism are just simply kibr. So it's just about arrogance and pride and thinking you're better than other people. So if you just deal with that character flaw, that particular vice of kibr, right, then we can overcome race just by simply dealing with that. But the problem I find with that particular understanding is that it gives the impression that both the causes and solutions to our problems are all internal. That there are no external causes or pressures that make me an incomplete and imperfect human being or creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is fundamentally the problem. And so if you think that it's always about me and it's always something internal, then I'm never going to be able to see outside of me any problems with the system under which I live. I'm never going to launch a critique against it, because I believe that it's part of the natural order, right, to a certain extent. That we're born, brought into this world, whatever country it may be, and regardless of how much we try to educate our children about race identity, or we try to make them raceless, right? That whatever the situation, that eventually we all have to eventually indoctrinate our children, or at least introduce them to the realities on the ground. That although they may perceive themselves a certain way, that there are others who have a different perception of them. And we have to introduce them to that world, right? Whether they call it the real world or just the world that has been constructed for us, you see. And so like for instance, if you ask my daughter what color you are, she'll say brown, right? She won't say black, you know. And you might say you're brown, yeah, but this may be the way that you conceive of yourself or perceive of yourself. but that's because I didn't teach her that. That was her own sort of way that she decided to sort of apprehend the world. See that person is she even made up a name for my wife's color called Mullah. She made it up. This made up word. So but that's her. But she sometimes she listens to the news with me and she sees people talk about, oh, that person's black. So he's not black. What do you mean he's black? See, and then I have to explain to her that, well, yeah, he's not, but the way that the society, she understands a little bit, I think, the way the society sort of defines that person is different than the way the person may want to be defined. See, so when we understand that these external causes can affect our sense of reality, you see, then we have to consider that particular structure or part of society to be something which potentially is a veil, hindering us from the reality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to know. So some would say race is a biological fact. It's just undeniable. Nothing you can get around it. You can get around. And as Muslims, that becomes problematic because if we begin with this idea that, oh, we all come from Adam and Eve, and then we say, well, yes, we're different races, right? We're all one race, but then no, but we're all multiple races. That can be problematic, But even if you read the Quran, some will say, well, the Quran, Allah said He made you into nations and tribes. So there you go. He made you into races. He didn't say He made you into races. He made you into shu'ub wa qaba'il. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. What is actually intended by that, according to the exegetes, the Muslim exegetes? And so there are those amongst anthropologists who say that the human race or species have what they call a monogenetic or a monogenetic origin, which means that, and this is the view of most anthropologists, that we all originate from a single source, be it first from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then of course from a sort of archetype human being. Now of course Darwinian anthropology goes a little bit further than that. It talks about an evolutionary process, evolving from other types of animals and things like that until eventually we became what we become. And I'm not sure if we can really reconcile at least that much about evolution with Islam, but we didn't evolve from apes. Islam doesn't teach us that we evolved from apes. That Allah created Adam alayhi salam, he was a human being, the first human being, and so on, and we became what we are right now. On the other hand, there are those amongst anthropologists who say that we have multiple origins. That not all people come from the same mother or father, mother and father, and that is a minority view amongst anthropologists historically. But most of them say that we originate from a single origin. This hadith is, and of course, is written in Arabic. This is the hadith which is a very famous hadith. Part is actually a speech of the Prophet ﷺ, which, in some versions of the hadith, he has said in it, "La fadla al-Arabiyyin ala-ajamiyyin wa la-ajamiyyin ala-Arabi illa bi-taqwa," that there is no superiority no superior of Arab over non-Arab or non-Arab over Arab, except through taqwa, through God consciousness. And this is the version of Imam al-Tirmidhi, actually, and so that particular part of the speech has been omitted. But usually when we think of that statement of the Prophet ﷺ, Muslims often believe that that statement was made on the when did he make that statement? The film on pilgrimage, right? And that's what Muslims believe. Actually, that's not when he made that statement. The statement actually was made on the day of the conquest of Mecca. The day of the conquest of Mecca. Anybody know why he made this statement?
Because Bilal.
Bilal? What about him?
They want to be loud. He Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam want to be loud to call his hand, and the Arabs wasn't down with that.
Right. Right. That he wanted to be loud to call the adhan or to call the people to assemble, and the Arabs weren't down with that. Okay. That's a concise way to put it. Yeah, but fundamentally that is correct what had occurred. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, he conquered Mecca. Many of the people who had been fighting against them, they had accepted Islam on this day. And so the Mufassirin, or the Muslim exegetes, commentators on the Quran, they mention a story about, or narrations about 3 men in particular who had just become Muslim on the day of the conquest. So you can give them a little bit, have a little bit of mercy on them in that regard. And they saw Bilal climbing to the top of the Kaaba. And one of them said, I'm glad my father's not alive to see this. Another one has said, if there's any, if Allah wants to, He'll change this. Yeah. Well, basically, he hopes that Allah wants to change this. And then the third one has said, that Muhammad not have anyone other than this black crow to make the summons. And so word got to the Prophet ﷺ, and then he stood up and he gave this speech. He said, أيها الناس إن الله أذهب عنكم عبية الجاهلية وتعظمها بآبائها. That, people, verily Allah, He has rid you of the vainglory of the pre-Islamic times and your magnification of your fathers. فَالنَّاسُ رَجُلَانِ. So people are one of 2 types. رَجُلٌ بَرٌ تَقِيٌّ كَرِيمٌ عَلَى اللَّهِ. The first is a person who is righteous, God-conscious, and is valuable to Allah, of great value to Allah. وَفَاجِرٌ شَقِيٌّ هَيِّنٌ عَلَى اللَّهِ. And then the other is a wicked person who is wretched and is of no insignificance in the sight of Allah. And then he said, when Nasr min Adam, all humanity comes from Adam, وَخَلَقَ اللَّهُ آدَمَ مِنَ التُّرَابِ. And Allah created Adam from dirt. And then in some narrations of the speech, and then he says there's no superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab, nor non-Arab over an Arab, except for taqwa, except for taqwa, right? And then and others say that this is actually the occasion when the verse was revealed, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu inna akramakum inda Allahi atqakum inna Allaha alimun khabir. That, humanity, mankind, verily we have created you from a male and female and have made you into shu'ub and qaba'il, nations and tribes, lita'arafu, so that you may acknowledge and know one another. Verily, the most noble of you in the sight of God are those who is most God conscious. And so that verse was revealed in this relating to this particular event. And so why we begin with the issue of Bilal is not to again to take this into discussion of racism, because we want to talk about race. But I want to just bring it up because I know that often when somebody says race, you automatically think racism. And we also automatically think, when we hear racism, we automatically think black, black or white against black, right? When racism actually is something a little bit more than that. And so basically, we want to make a distinction between what is meant by race and racism. That when I say race, I'm simply just talking about the perception and conception that we have of our, be it genetic or phenotypic difference from one another, our ethnic sort of distinctions from one another, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in all people. But when I speak of racism, I'm not speaking of one's aesthetic sensibilities, one's aesthetic preferences. Like, for instance, let's say white men are head over heels for Indian women, for instance. They like Chinese or Indian women, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't mean that they're self-hating white people, as we would say, because they may not be attracted to their own to women like themselves. Or the same thing for women attracted to other men who are not of their ethnic background, or blacks. So that's that in itself, in terms of like our taste, the type of cuisine we like, the type of clothing we like, the colors that sort of we feel accent certain aspects of our dress and attire. That's one thing. Everyone has a prerogative, you have the inclination. None of that means that you're a self-hating black person, self-hating white person, or Pakistani. None of, in my opinion, that means nothing. It doesn't mean anything. That's not racism if you have a preference for someone who looks different than yourself, or in terms of choosing a mate, or a certain type of cuisine, things like that. If anything, you find that statistically that most people actually prefer to marry with those who are more akin to them phenotypically. Statistics show that. Now, that doesn't mean that people are racist. So if for instance, if I don't want to marry a non-black person, quote unquote black person, because that's a problematic term in a sense, that doesn't make me a racist. Or if a white person or a person who's Irish only wants to marry an Irish person, doesn't make them a racist. You see, not necessarily. Doesn't necessarily make them a racist. It could, yeah, but not necessarily. So we should try not to. That's what we call ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism. You see, and so it's just that that you find your kind more appealing and more attractive. It could just simply be the case, and I would argue that that's what it is in most cases. Now, with racism, when I speak about racism, I'm talking about structural or institutionalized policies, laws, right? That privilege a certain type of people simply because of the way that they look, right? Or a particular caste system they belong to. While it denies privileges to others simply because they don't fit the bill. They don't take on or have the same appearance as those others. That's what I mean when I talk about racism, personally. When I talk about racism, I mean on the institutional level. So if Ronald Reagan launches the war on drugs, and statistics are telling us that more white people are getting high than black people, and then all of a sudden all the efforts of the government are focused in the black neighborhoods, right, to the extent that that more blacks are now being put in prison as opposed to the white people are being put in prison also using drugs, or using drugs more than they are, then that's racism. That's the structural problem. So you go from a prison population of 300,000 to 2 million in almost 20 years, about 20 years, you see, and most of the people in prison because of some drug-related charge, often because of drug possession, not even sort of selling drugs, but drug possession, like marijuana, things like that, and so, and then also most of those people being indicted or convicted based upon deals being proposed to them. So people are afraid to admit, they're sort of forced to admit guilt as well in most of these cases. Never proven. In most cases they're not proven, but they're forced to say, listen, if you don't accept the deal, then we're gonna charge you with this, we're gonna give you this many years. So you have those type of scenarios. That's racism. See? Now that doesn't mean that you don't try to guide people and condemn those people who are in the neighborhoods and selling drugs and things like that and poisoning people. No, but the greater problem is the system. You see? The greater problem is the system because certain people have been let off and others are being dealt with unjustly. So like Sharia, anti-Sharia, all these other things. So in the Arabic language, there really is no word for race. Really, there's no word for race in the Arabic language. Now there's a word unsuriya, which is what we call a modern standard word, modern standard Arabic. It's not a classical word. Unsuriya, which racism, right? Is a modern standard word, but you have, for instance, the closest thing that comes to the meaning of race is what is called al-jins, and jins in the Arabic language means genus or species, right? The species of something. Sometimes it means of course, the kind or type. It can mean also gender. It means gender. Yeah. But some scholars use jins to indicate or to identify race or preferred race, and so you find some of them say jins al-Arab afdal min jins al-Ajam, that the Arab race is more superior than the non-Arab race. That you find these statements among scholars, Muslim scholars who say this. So they use the word jins. There's another word, an-nasab, which usually translates as lineage. And that is more common amongst the scholars and Muslim anthropologists. They use lineage, which to me, when I read it, and for instance, if I read Ibn Khaldun, when he uses lineage, to me he means race. He means race is his way, because that's the way he's defining race. Now in the Quran, the words that are usually translated or understood as race, the words shu'ub and qaba'il, are two different words where the exegetes they differ about. Shu'ub is the plural word shab, which means a people, right? So Allah made you into peoples, wa qaba'il, and tribes, from qabila. Yeah, and so many of the ulama say that shu'ub is a reference to the divisions of the non-Arabs. And the qaba'il are the Arabs. So he made you into non-Arab peoples, and he made you into Arab peoples, the qaba'il, you see. And so for this reason, once the scholars started to try to develop a sort of orthodox teaching about superiority or race superiority, actually this does exist, that scholars would argue that the Arabs are superior, a superior race to non-Arabs. And that's something we can talk about later on. And so they would say that the position of Ahlul Sunnah is that you have to believe that the Arabs are more superior than other races. And so those people who objected to this and rejected this understanding, they referred to as Shu'ubiyya. The Shu'ubiyya from Shu'ub. Allah made you into peoples. So the Shu'ubiyya were termed to be a sort of heretical type of group, the people who don't believe that the Arabs are superior to non-Arabs. So these are discussions that have been had in the past. And so basically, when we start to think about in the Islamic context, and actually in this there's also overlap in the non-Muslim tradition in this regard, that it is believed that the race, or the entire human race, was pretty much wiped out during the flood of Noah alayhi salam. And then after this, the children of Noah were pretty much those who repopulated the planet after the great flood. And this also is alluded to in one surah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, after destroying those people, جَعَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُمُ الْبَاقِينَ, and we made his progeny those who remain. We made his progeny the remainder of them. So it alludes to this understanding that the children of the progeny of Noah were those who repopulated the planet. So we find a number of hadith that sort of they confirm or they reinforce this understanding. And this is also the same thing in the Christian tradition. We find this as well. Many of these reports, even though some can argue that the Muslims perhaps simply borrowed them from the Christians, these understandings. So there's one report, one hadith that reads that Sam, so the three sons of Noah, Sam, Japheth, and Ham, right? So Sam is the father of the Arabs. So the Sam, where we get the word Semite, right, from Sam. Right? So it's the Semitic peoples. So the Semitic peoples are from Sam. Japheth is the father of the Romans, so basic Europeans generally. And Ham is the father of the Ethiopians. And the Ethiopians was a general term utilized to apply to black people. So you have these three sort of three primordial race categories. So the Arabs and of course the Romans and Ethiopians. But then the next hadith says Noah, Sam, Ham, and Japheth bore children. Sam bore the Arabs. Sam bore the Arabs, the Persians, and the Romans. So basically the Persians and the Arabs, all of them are attributed to the same origin. And there's goodness in them. Japheth bore Gog and Magog, the Turks, the Slavs, and there is no good in them. And Ham bore the Copts, the Berbers, and the blacks. And so this hadith is found in the Musnad of Imam Bazzar. So it's not a very popular collection of hadith, but it does exist there. Another narration: to Noah was born Sam, and in his children there was whiteness and brownness. Ham, and in his children there was blackness and a little whiteness. And Japheth, and in them was pinkness and redness. And so, and then finally, and this actually hadith was considered to be fabricated by the scholars. And then finally, and there are a number of hadith I could mention, but I chose these in particular. Imam Ibn Jawzi, the Hamid scholar of the 6th Islamic century, he reads a hadith, mentions one that says, Ham bore Kush, Mirash, Mu'ad, and Bawan. From Bawan came the Slavs, the Nubians, the Ethiopians, the Indians, and the Sind. So you find actually Indians and the Sind, that they actually fall within, along with the blacks and so on, according to that particular hadith. So you have these 3 primordial races or 3 primordial colors. It's the black, white, and red. So this is a very original sort of historical sort of perception of race. That's with regard to race being a reference to being a sort of a biological fact in the eyes of certain people. That sort of comes down to that. Even though there are many, so I'm giving you sort of a very abbreviated version of this. This actually can be like a whole like 1 or 2 semester class, if not even longer than that. But I'm giving you a very, very condensed and abbreviated version of all of this. But for those who argue that race is a social contract, they say that, for instance, there's one author, one scholar, Matthew Fry Jacobson, who has a book called Whiteness of a Different Color. And in this book, what he basically argues is that white people in America, there's a hierarchy even in whiteness, you see. And not all white people, who people we consider to be white people, they were white, always white, you see. That something happened in the laws that changed in the 20th century in particular that made people who traditionally had not been considered to be white. So the Jews, the Italians, the Irish, people like that, they were not considered to be white. And so when we read, for instance, we the people of the United States, or every man is created equal, that those statements basically are biased towards the Anglo-Saxon. So we the people mean the Anglo-Saxon. That all men are created equal. Literally meant, not women, men, but definitely Anglo-Saxon. So everybody else is polluted in some way. But eventually things occurred in the country that accommodated these other peoples who we consider to be white today. So Matthew Fry Jacobson, in his book, he mentions that race is not just a conception, right? There's also a perception. And what he means by that is that we begin with these ideas that sometimes they may originate with ourselves or they're given to us from without, and then the perception of the truthfulness or the reality of those definitions and constructs make us even to reinforce these ideas. So for instance, I remember some years ago, Tiger Woods had sort of denied his blackness. Right? A lot of black people were up in arms about this. He's a self-hating Negro and so on. When I saw this, I felt like, well, everybody has the right to define themselves. But because of black people's sense of solidarity, I guess you would say, with people who they considered to be of their same color, they felt that this was what we call Uncle Tomism, right? That he was sort of denying his blackness and trying to, people we find out they have Indian blood in them because they got some Indian blood in them. Right? I'm not really black.
I'm not.
Right,
100%.
Right. Cherokee, yeah. So that needs to be understood that our perception of black or natural blackness, or this idea that we are all sort of genetically all this, well, we're all genetically the same, but we're all sort of one single people, against this majority white people, right? That we have to understand that was a construction. That we were defined by the actual people that we feel often to be in opposition to, and so we perpetuated those understandings. Another scholar, Audrey Smedley, had this to say about the word race. It said that she said it was intricately linked with certain presuppositions of thought held by European colonists from the 16th to the 18th century. During that period, the word was transformed in the English language from a mere classificatory term of biophysical variation into a folk idea. This idea expressed certain attitudes toward human differences as well as prejudgments about the nature and social value of these differences. So even the word race itself has undergone an evolution. And so just to show you, give you a sort of glimpse at this, if we start 1758, an anthropologist by the name of Carolus Linnaeus, or just called sometimes Carl Linnaeus, he wrote his book, Systema Naturae. And in this book, he tried to classify what we call the human races. And so basically, he sort of nailed it down to four. So there are four types of people on the planet. And so one being, well, first and foremost, is that people, in terms of their behavior, I will come to the division of the people in a second, but people's behavior are determined by a balance of what we call the four humors, the four fluids in the body. This is a pseudoscience or scientific understanding. So the balance between blood, phlegm, what we call choleric, with yellow bile, and melancholy, the black bile in the body. So depending on how much of an imbalance you have in one or more of these things would determine what type of character, personality, your moods may be. So for instance, they have terms like sanguine. If you're a sanguine person, you're a cheerful person. Phlegmatic, you're sluggish. Choleric, you're sort of prone to anger. And melancholic, that you're sort of a sad type of person, you see, based upon these humors. But then when we look at this four-part type division of the human races, and so he said the black, the white, the red, and the yellow, or he even saw the American, the European, the Asian, and African. These were four basic categories. So when he goes to try to describe these people in terms of their humor, their color, their humor, posture, and behavior patterns, he says that the American, and the American he means by the Native Americans, the Indians, right, the Aboriginal peoples. So for them, their color, they're red, they're choleric. And choleric means what? You remember this. Choleric means prone to anger, right? Right? And they're upright in terms of their posture, very upright posture. And then he also said to them that they are ruled by habit. Ruled by habit. I'll come back to that in a second to show you the significance of it. Of the European, he says they're white, sanguine. Sanguine means what? Happy. Happy, cheerful people, right? And they're muscular, right? And they're ruled by custom. Now, what's the difference between these two? Of course, when you look at, I'm choleric or I'm sanguine, I get angry, I'm sanguine. And so naturally, even though it's not as overt in terms of this sort of racist inclination that's involved, so basically say his own people, of course, it sounds better to say, somebody's a happy person than to say that they're an angry person, and then also it's better to say you're muscular as opposed to you're sluggish, you see? Yes, we're muscular people, but then to say that you're ruled by habit as opposed to custom. So custom there's something involved with custom. Custom is like, okay, this is something you thought it out. You're actually using your brain. Say, okay, we'll just develop these customs and everything to help other people. Well, habit is like, I got addicted to something. I can't help myself, right? So the Americans are ruled by habit, the Amerindians are ruled by habit, and then you have Europeans ruled by custom. For the Asians, they're pale yellow, melancholy, right? What's melancholy? Sad, right? Stiff people. They're ruled by belief. So kind of like legends, fairy tales, folklore. It's not custom. Custom is ruled by custom. You use your brain, your intellect. You won't believe. It's tales of the ancients, right? And then when you come to the Africans, they're black, phlegmatic. Phlegmatic is what? Huh? Lazy. That's a good way. Lazy, right? Right, exactly. Lazy. So relaxed, he says, relaxed. and they're ruled by caprice. So they're not even ruled by habit, they're ruled by caprice. Because animals are ruled by caprice, right? Aren't they? I'm hungry. There's I'm a lion. there's a deer. You know, my desires, right, rule me. I rule by my desires. I mean, and these are people who are like being read and consulted and consulted by dignitaries, right? These weren't just some normal people. Guy just writing a book. You know, this is some obscure book. These were normative teachings. Now, a man who came after him, Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, wrote in 1795 another book, actually, where he just simply added another category. Instead of saying 4 and then 5, so he added the Malay, the brown people, to the category of race. And so basically, what I want to do at this point is to show you in terms of like the theory of racial construction. And again, we can't go through all of this, but remember there's a colonial period. In the colonial period, at one point, the Spanish, they were those who were in power. They were those who were in charge. And so, one particular example I want to show you about how those people, when they came, for instance, into Mexico, and the type of racial classifications they developed. And I'm going to show you about 4 of these types of racial classifications, but there are about 16 or 19 classifications of people, of races of people that they developed under the Spanish. So, for instance, there's one we call Mestizaje people, and so the Mestiza are like when you have a Spanish father and then a Native American mother. So Spanish father, Native American mother, so you see the child there, the baby, you know, sort of gives you an idea of what will come out as. The second is what we call castizo or castiza for the female, is when the Spanish father is a Spanish father and a mestiza mother. Yeah. So it's mestiza, right? Mestiza is a result of Spanish father and Native American.
So basically, three-quarters Spanish.
Right. Right, exactly. And then castizo, castiza, Spanish father, mestiza mother. Then you have another degree, Española or the Españolo, where you have the Spanish mother and castiza father. So you look at the child, see. Then the fourth, the Cholo or the Chola, mestizo father and Native American mother. And that's what you would get. So you have, so this is only 4 of them, but they're like, it continues, it goes on and on and on. And so you have a construction of race. And in North America, for instance, we have in Virginia, in 1662 in Virginia, there were laws passed in Virginia that pretty much made every baby child born to a woman who was black, an African descent, to be a slave automatically from birth, matrilineal. In 1663, in Maryland, another law was passed in Maryland, actually pretty much making all people black who were considered to be slaves. Even if they're already free, this law was passed. They passed the law and said everybody who's black, you know, is automatically a slave. You know, and then in 1681, that was returned to its original rule of following the matrilineal pattern, basically that if a black woman gives birth to a child, then that child is automatically a slave from birth. You know, and so we see some of those problems there. In 1924, again, Virginia, being that it was the first English colony, you know, all of these things are sort of happening in Virginia, and then Maryland, areas like that. In 1924 is where we get the Racial Integrity Act. The Racial Integrity Act is what we call the act which pretty much has the law of the 1-drop rule, as you would say, right? The 1-drop rule, you know, so you have 1 drop of black African blood, then you're black. Even if you look white, you know, if you discover that you have some degree of African blood in you, then you're considered to be white. And we see that this sort of worked its way up, all the way up into the 20th century, you see. And if you get a chance, you know, go online, look at the Racial Integrity Act. I don't want to keep everybody too long, so I'm trying to go through this, try to get to the main issue, of course, in regards to the Islamic tradition. But during the 1920s to 1960s is really the period when sort of whiteness became sort of consolidated. You know, so those people who generally were not considered to be white prior to that time were now automatically, they were considered to be white. And then we know that the act itself, the Racial Integrity Act, was abolished eventually. You know, then of course 1965, the New Immigration Act allowed immigration from many different parts of the world, generally were not allowed. So Matthew Fry Jacobson says that the period from the 1920s to the 1960s saw a dramatic decline in the perceived differences among these white others. Immigration restriction, along with internal black migrations, altered the nation's racial alchemy and redrew the dominant racial configuration along the strict binary line of white and black, creating Caucasians where before had been so many Celts, Hebrews, Teutons, Mediterraneans, and Slavs. So all of those divisions existed prior to, and all of a sudden there's a consolidation that occurs in America. And so you can see how people are being constructed. So a conception of race is created, and then you start to perceive it as the truth, as a reality. And you can say the same thing for the Arabs. When we think of Arabness, I mean, what does an Arab look like? Right? Or what is the Arab supposed to look like? There are many Muslims, from Afghanistan and Pakistan and even Africa, where they'll say, well, no, we're descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. Right? And often people will laugh. What do you mean you're a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad? You're African. Or you're from Afghanistan. You couldn't possibly be from descendant from Prophet. Or you're from somewhere else, another place, Indonesia. How can you possibly be a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad? You're not an Arab. He was an Arab. And what an Arab is, is not clearly defined. Because if we just simply reflect upon the origin of the Arabs, that the origin of the Arabs are believed to be two different strains, two different original strains of Arabs. Well, I'll put it like this: of those who came about prior to the marriage of Ismail into Banu Jurham, those were called the bygone Arabs, right? These are the original Arabs who had pretty much wandered around, and the people of Tamud and Ad, and as mentioned in the Quran, and generally they're believed to have sort of died off, but then these other Arabs appear. These Arabs who originate from Yemen, and so they generally are considered to be descendants of a man known as Qahtan. When Hajar alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam come into Mecca, in the desolate area of Mecca, eventually one of the tribes from Yemen, Banu Jurham, make their way to there, and they meet them, and they ask for them could they stay there with them, and they did. And eventually Ismail, as he grew older, he married into the tribe. And so of course, children were born, and then these people will become to be recognized themselves as Arabs as well. But Ismail himself, his mother was Hajar. And Hajar was from where? From Egypt, right? She was Coptic, according to Strong's views. She was a Coptic, one very dark woman amongst the Coptics. And Ibrahim, he wasn't an Arab as well. He wasn't also an Arab. And so Ismail is the son of those two people. And so he marries a woman from Yemen, another dark people. And then the Arabs, spread out from there. So these two strains, the Adnani and the Qahtani Arabs, are born. So see, right from the very beginning, there's no such thing as a pure Arab. See? So basically, what you come to understand from this is that to become an Arab was not very difficult. Simply as a matter of you intermarry, you become an Arab, or your children are born, or their first language becomes Arabic, and all of a sudden they become Arabs through that. Right. So Ibn Khaldun, this is what actually he says about the issue of Arabs. He says, we have already stated in the previous section that the nomadic peoples are those who embrace the natural mode of subsistence, of farming and tending to livestock. As for those whose mode of subsistence is agriculture and tending to livestock, sedentariness is more fitting than transiency. As for those whose mode of subsistence is connected with camels, they are most transient and venture furthest into the uninhabited wastelands, and these are the Arabs. Now, of course, I admitted a lot of things, but sort of want to give you the crux of what he was saying. So basically here, when he talks about an Arab, he doesn't say anything about a certain color, certain lineage they come from. He's actually talking about something they did, right? As a people, they tended to camels, So this is how he's describing the Arabs from the very start of it. And we find the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, "Ta'allamu min ansabikum ma tasiluna bihi arhamakum." Learn about your lineages enough to maintain the ties of kinship. And there's another statement that sort of counteracts this, which is not a statement of the Prophet ﷺ, but it's a saying that people have, that an-nasabu ilmu la yanfa wa jahalatun la tadur. That lineage is a knowledge, or it's a race, is a knowledge that yields no benefit, and ignorance of which causes no harm. Now, Ibn Khaldun, he basically said both statements are true. But it's just that when we think of the first, the Prophet is actually encouraging us to gain knowledge of our lineages, gain knowledge of where we come from. For what purpose? The purpose of maintaining ties of kinship to people. And through maintaining ties of kinship, we pass on wealth. We also come to the defense of others. We have a sense of solidarity, sense of cohesion, and a sense of patronage as well. That those are desirable things. Like Ibn Khaldun even talks about they're desirable things. So we can have that in our life. But when those things don't result and don't exist, then they're really pointless. For us to sort of pride ourselves in who we are, where we come from. And that's why we find him saying as well on other pages. For instance, in the first quote, he says that the only benefit of lineage is this cohesion that leads to maintaining bonds of kinship until patronage and chauvinism result. Anything beyond that is dispensable, since lineage is an illusory matter. That lineage is an illusory matter. Race is an illusory matter. It's imaginary. It's not even real. He said, "النسب أمر وهمي لا حقيقة له." It has no reality. Because he goes and shows in this book how people become members of the tribe just simply by, okay, well, I'm fleeing from someone trying to kill me. I come to your village, you take me in, and you accept me as one of your own, and then all of a sudden I become associated with that particular people. You see, and this happens quite often. And so the Arabs themselves are very diverse people, of many different types of multicolored people. There were generally what we call a black people. It's like in America, a black people. There are many different shades of them. Most of them are brown and dark black. But this is, and then there were some of them who were very light colored as well, because they were all submerged or accepted into Arabness simply through acculturation and through the acceptance of language. That language is what made them Arabs. And then in another quote, he said, "There is not a single member of the human race who possesses an uninterrupted honor among his fathers from Adam to himself, except for that which exists for the Prophet ﷺ as a mark of honor for him and a protection of the secret in him." So basically, he's to say that that really anybody wants to brag about lineage and have a pure lineage. The only person we know who actually does have one is the Prophet himself, ﷺ. Who is well established that that his lineage can be traced back. But even still, of course, they're all mixed people. Even in that regard. So basically, that's the end of my presentation about this particular topic. I know it's been a little bit long, so I'm if there are any comments, any questions, we can. Like I said, this is a conversation that we can probably go all night with. But of course, we want everybody to get an opportunity to go back home, and inshallah, perhaps in the future, we have some follow-up with regard this or similar topics. Inshallah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi.
Question. When I was in undergrad, I took a class and we read Ibn Khaldun, Muqaddimah of Ibn Khaldun in the class, and I was really young at the time. But the only thing I remember is I was like, this guy seems hecka racist. But I don't know, because it was a translation, so I don't know if that was just a translator adding his own stuff into it, but when you read it, did it seem like he...
Well, Ibn Khaldun, you have to read Ibn Khaldun as an individual who sees himself as utilizing a particular method that he believes is objective. An objective method of historiography and of sociology. That pretty much he argues that environmental factors, they determine or they influence behavior. They influence movement, invention, and things similar to that. So for instance, those people who are the furthest removed from the eastern sector of the world, you know, he attributes to them a less amount of civilization as he does to those who are closer to places like Mecca, Medina, or whatever. And so basically the same type of things he'll say about blacks, he says about the Slavs people.
No, when I read it, first I read what he said about the white people, and I was like, my brother. You know, just then I read what he said about the black people. I said, man, this dude ain't cool. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, right, right, because now it's like, you know, it's attacking you, but like it's okay to attack somebody else. And so, right, no, Ibn Khaldun, often when you read a lot of Muslim historians who will speak about black people, the people of Sudan, they're called Sudan, the blacks. They don't mean that in a general sense. They're talking about specific type of black people. So, for instance, there are other parts of the books. He praises the people of Mali, the people of Tekror, and things like that. He praises them. You know, he talks about they're very civilized people and so on and so on. And the people of Ethiopia, Abyssinia, many scholars have written praise for the people of the Ethiopians and the people of Sudan in that area, the people of Egypt. But the people of what we call the Zanj, which the area of Tanzania, like in the eastern sort of horn of sub-Saharan Africa, right, on the eastern side, that when they speak negatively of black people, 9 times out of 10 they're talking about those people. And because when you see the descriptions, they're saying things like, okay, well, these are people who didn't really wear clothes. Some of them were cannibals. Like he talks about this, you know, he's cannibalistic. He actually says of them that they're closer to being inarticulate animals than they are being humans. You know, he actually speaks to them in that way. You know, and he says specifically in another place. And so he's speaking more so about them as opposed to speaking about all black people. You see, and of course, I mean, we can still take issue with that. But we do understand that the statement sometimes sounds general, but it's actually more specific than we usually would think. You know, and actually, these are some things I would look into deeply. Because, yeah, I've read this stuff before, and so I spent a lot of time reading Ibn Khaldun. You know, but I'm able to understand, you know, what his particular method and his approach is there. That doesn't mean that he wasn't influenced by some sense of some aesthetic sort of a bias that existed during his time by his own people. You know, it doesn't mean that that's the case. But the important thing, I think, is to understand that those people didn't see them, black people didn't see themselves as a monolith like black people in America did. You follow me? That Ibn Khaldun himself likely was, you know, a colored person. To
when I read it, I was like, I thought that because he was like from Spain, right?
No, he's from Tunisia. He's from Tunisia, Africa, North Africa.
But I was like, whenever I read it, I was like, I thought he was, you know, because he was talking about the white people, you know, and then I knew he was some, like what we would consider Moor back in the day.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he's North Africa.
Yeah.
So, right. Yeah, and this is another issue. Like, for instance, you know, somebody will come here from Dominican Republic, from Haiti, from even like Brazil. And we'll say, you know, he might look like you. They'll say, he's a black man. He might take offense to that. You want to know why? Because in Brazil, the whatever amount of white you have in you, you're no longer black. You follow me? It's a different sort of perception, or conception of race. It's not like here it's like any amount of blackness you have, you're not white. In Brazil, it's like any amount of whiteness, you're not black anymore. You see? And so they might take offense to that. Of course, there's certain types of oppression that happen for people who are actually dark, like for instance, man like yourself, you know, in those, I'm just making an example. Yeah. I'm becoming, this is real stuff because like even amongst people here in the United States, black people, we call ourselves black people, we make fun of dark black people, you know. So, you follow me? And so we'll get upset that a Brazilian or a Haitian may not consider you, for instance, to be black, right? You know, but it's like what? It's a different type of reality understanding they have. Every country has a particular conception of race. You go to Japan, it's more like it's like genetic, like it's like blood. They got genotypic fashion. They want to check your blood and make sure that you're authentic Japanese. So, for instance, a Japanese person who's born in Brazil and raised in Brazil, who grows up thinking that, well, I'm better than the other Brazilians. I'm not really a Brazilian. And they're actually examples of this. You see these videos on YouTube. You know, there's this one in particular video I saw a couple of years ago where, man, he goes to Japan, grew up in Brazil, goes to Japan, can't really speak the languages that well, and people just kind of didn't deal with him the same way. He felt he was being dealt racism. You know, he was a Japanese guy, you know, grew up in Brazil. And so 10 minutes of this, and at the end of the video, they asked him, he said, well, so what do you think about yourself now? He said, well, I've come to realize that I'm not Japanese. You know? He said, well, where are you? He said, I'm Brazilian. Yeah. So it just depends on where you are. There's a different way that you can see that race is conceived of.
You made a good point about that because, like, not to offend my friend here, but I live with Filipino roommates, right? And I notice sometimes it's like they try to adopt the culture of like what white people would usually do. And me being white, sometimes I don't want to have to tell them this, but it's like, I'm white. It's really overrated because at the end of the day, we're all human anyway. So, you know, what are we to do, you know?
Yeah, but that's like Ibn Khaldun again. Ibn Khaldun says it's the, we call that the al-maghlub, al-maghlub, the conquered, mula'un biqtida bil-ghalib, you know, it's the conquered is always, it's infatuated with emulation of the conqueror, you know. And this I mentioned as a sort of proverb that the Arabs have, that the al-ammatu ala din al-malik, that the commoners are upon the religion of the king, you know. And so that's a sort of a social norm or universal that, you know, if you conquer people and you feel that because people develop an admiration for those who they're conquered by. You see, and so they naturally want to emulate them. And so it's just one of those things that we have to come to the realizations. Like, that's why I said I started with taking us out of darkness into light, because there's different levels of it. You know, so if I come to the realization that what is the motivation behind my action? Why am I doing this? Why do I want to be like these people? Then I can sort of catch myself, and then I can start to judge what I want to do like those people according to a particular moral criteria. I say, is it good for me to do that? You see, not because they are who they are, but it's because, you know, this is something good to do, as opposed to I'm doing it because white people or black people, they're better than me and everything, and they know the way better than I do, so I'm going to just simply follow them. You know, and so, and in some sense, it's the same thing. Our relationship with the Prophet Islam. You know, spiritually, we're conquered by the Prophet Islam. At least we should feel that we are, and so we should try to emulate the Prophet Islam.
When we deal with race, you also, I think, leave out. I think they kind of coincide with each other is nationality.
Right.
Because some people get the two mixed up between nationality. Some people have pride in their national origin.
Right.
You know, so I'm Japanese, I'm this and I'm that. Not necessarily race.
Right.
Although race plays a part, you know, in that. So you find that, I know a long time ago, if an African come from Nigeria, he can be identified with Nigeria. He's not looked upon as one of us that's born and raised here because...
And he doesn't look upon himself as
and he doesn't look upon himself because he has a country.
Right.
You know, he doesn't have that type of psychosis that we have through indoctrination.
Right.
And so, you know, that also sets them apart in other countries.
Right.
But they still want to emulate other people, because you see that. For example, if you go to some of the Arab countries, you see that the Indian, the Pakistani, the Bangladeshi, the Arabs have their foot on their back, on their neck. And then that kind of filters down to the next one because they are on top. So if you take the European, because sometimes they don't like to use white, and even in Europe they don't, very seldom you hear them refer to themselves as white. They refer to themselves as their national origin. So the Arabs see that the Caucasian is on top. So he has his foot, even though from afar. And so this thing kind of trickles as you mentioned before. So how do we, how do we get out of this? What's the solution to breaking that psychological thing that we have?
Yeah, I would say, I would argue that nationalism is the root of the problem. Right. And what I mean by nationalism, I don't mean like, black nationalism or white nationalism. I mean nationalism in the sense of like the nation state. Because the nation state created the problem. See? I mean, there's actually a verse. Actually, I wanted to include it in this slide. It's a verse from I forget what surah it's from, but this is a verse in the Fir'auna ala fil ardi وجعل أهلها شيعا يستضعف طائفة منهم. That verily Pharaoh, he committed excess in the land, and he divided the people into factions, oppressing a group amongst them. He slaughtered their sons and he allowed the women to live. In the volcano Muslimin, verily he was amongst those who committed excess. And so the issue is like say Pharaoh is the archetype oppressor, and people follow Pharaoh. People read about Pharaoh. I mean, the people who rule the world today, they look at Pharaoh. He's their Rasul. He's their messenger. He's their paragon. Pharaoh. Pharaoh knew how to do it. He knew how to control. He knew how to get things, set things straight. And so he stratified the people. The nation state is like to teach you that you're an American. It's like telling you what color or race you are. About being what you have to be. You have to be patriotic. You have to even almost worship the rulers and those identified with the rulers. You have to worship Pharaoh. Is he? He's God. You're right. I'm the greatest of all you. I'm the highest God of all you. So it doesn't mean that his people weren't God too. It's like I'm so me and my people, and so that's the archetype model for tyrants. It's Pharaoh. So once we realize how that our current reality is not what the reality was in the pre-modern period, or the period prior to the nationalism, the birth of the nation state, right? National anthem, right? Everybody, I mean, all of these different things, their flags. That's what did it to us. I would say that's fundamentally what did it to us more than anything else. Now that doesn't mean that there wasn't some sense of self-prejudice. And there was racist type of treatment among people, and there weren't certain policies or laws in certain pre-modern institutions that privileged and denied privilege to others. But it's just in the current reality is that we imagine ourselves to be a certain type of people. We allow the government to define us because the government, they're the last word in everything. If they say I'm black, I'm black. If they say I'm white, I'm white. If they say I'm Arab, I'm Arab. If they say I'm Pakistani, I'm Pakistani. And so this move on a lot of people to try to say we want to be able to check as many different types of ethnic background as we want to. That it might be a good move, but I think ultimately the only thing that's really going to erase it is that once we stop asking people, in senses what their racial background. Once we stop asking people on job applications, what's your ethnic background, right? And then people have to be looked at based upon, their qualifications. Now it doesn't mean that I'm in favor of just simply getting rid of the current type of setup because there's certain inequality, certain type of inequality that doesn't exist because of the previous system. So people have, in order for them to catch up with the majority, they have to be. It's like I'm in favor of what do you call affirmative action. I'm in favor of that, because. When you're talking about a person, people have always been placed all the way back at the back of the race and given a wheelchair, leg broken, and given a wheelchair to try to keep up with everyone else. I think that those people should be given certain types of credits or perks because of the oppression that had been done to them. So it's difficult. So, but I think that's maybe the starting point of it. So it's about realization of what has happened to us first and foremost.
I grew up in Maryland. Maryland was one of the states that, you know, you are who they say you are. But in the 70s, in the early 70s, we kind of challenged that because we used to have racial designations on everything. We only had 4, Negro, black, colored, and other. So we got together, and as you mentioned a little earlier, a group of us. First, we made up our own birth certificate. Okay. And we challenged them and say, well, we went first to the motor vehicle. And they said, well, how can you tell me who I am? First of all. Right. You can't tell me who I am. I'm telling you who I am. Right. You know, and we reversed it on that. Right. So we had a big meeting and they said, look, so they said, well, what do you want us to do? We said, we want you to change the racial designation on our house. So they said, what do you want to change it to? We said, white. Because, you know, it denotes superiority and not inferiority. Right, exactly. And so they looked at us like we were crazy. We said, okay, but don't tell anybody. And if anybody comes down here, they have to come from you all. Right. So okay, no problem. Okay, so they did that. And it was staunch. At that particular time, where you went in America, you had those racial designations on all your documents. So the word got out and some people come down there and, you know, they said, well, we got to close this down, but it remained with us. So one of the brothers got stopped by the police. He said, let me see the driver's license. Gave him the driver's license. And he looked down and he was like astonished. Because he looked on the back. He said he went to the cars and called in. He said, we got a white nigga here. Check this out. You know, he came back. He said it all worked out and everything. He gave it back. So we went from there to the social selective service department, and we changed that status. So that told us that, you know, regardless of what, because we made up our own stuff, we put seals and everything on, and challenged them. You know, and so when we challenged them, we found out that, and we brought history and all the other type of stuff, you know, with us to verify, you know, because what they were going on was weak. Right. You know, but it was, we knew that we can challenge them because they have no right to tell us who we are.
Right. Yeah, right. Sure. I'm going to come to you in a second, brother. But this is important because when you even think about, for instance, the president, like Barack Obama, why can't we consider Barack Obama a white man as opposed to him being considered to be a black man? You know, so that itself sort of magnifies the issue. What were you going to say?
I wanted to ask you, when was that Sulu's approach to being the 4 different analogies of the phlegm, the chloric, and the melancholy, and when was that done? What year? What study? And how many different ethnicities was studied? I want to know when was that done. Well, and one of the things that helped me kind of get along through this race magnet is just the Quran is the mother of books, so I identify with Cain and Abel. I kind of identify, I try to keep top with that spirit, recognizing that Cain's spirit in people, period. Because Abel had this spirit that was, there's 2 spirits of the 2 sons. That's what I kind of identify with people with, So I kind of try to keep, hoping our spirit be on that ability side, than that envy and that destroying mentality. So that kind of helps me get along with people.
Yeah. Well, the issue with the 4 humors, I mean, that's pretty old, But in terms of applying them to these particular 4 categories. I mean, this started like 1600s, 1700s, but particularly in the 1700s, really when they started to be applied, once they started to develop sort of race class, we call taxonomy, race taxonomy, with LINNEAUS. He talked about 4 categories of race, and then they tried to apply these things to that. And there's another pseudoscience called craniometry, where basically they trying to judge the superiority of a person based upon the shape of their, their skulls and the sort of positions of the angles of certain parts of your eyes, your nose, one another, things like that. And of course, the people who dealt with this, like for instance, Blumenbach, he dealt with that extensively, and so of course he concluded that the Georgian people were the most beautiful people, and they're the original people of the earth and so on. You know, but it's most of this stuff is happening after 1492, or moving up to that. So Columbus, right? You know, around this time, once the Europeans start to think of ways to take over the world, you know, because pretty much you're talking like Christian based society prior to the Reformation, and so basically the idea was that we're Christians, we're God's children. The whole world belongs to God, and so if we're God's children, it belongs to us. You know, so what they did, the Spanish and Portuguese, they drew a line. To anything east of this line is yours. Anything west of, even if you haven't been there yet, it belongs to you. So that's why Brazil's Portuguese. You know, I mean, you got all these other places that are Spanish. You know, so that's what happened. You see, but as time went on, of course, they had to develop more and more ways to convince the masses that this was sort of sanctioned by God. You know, they had to come up with the theory of the curse of Ham. You know, the black people were there, the descendants of Ham, and this is what made it legitimate to enslave them, only black people and so on. I'm sorry, I want to get to the brother back. Any of the sisters have anything to say? I don't want to ignore the sisters. Anybody have their hands up or spoken or no? No sisters? Okay.
Back in the day, back in the day, people used to say, you know, racism is taught at home. And then you made an excellent statement earlier when you said that, you know, your daughter, you know, for the people that have kids and children, you have to prepare them for the real world.
Right.
So you say you didn't teach them anything about racism. You let her come to that in her own.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and now that we have these kids that are growing up in the world now, you know, from an Islamic point of view, and not from like, you know, back in the day you used to take it from a black point of view, but from now from an Islamic point of view.
Yeah.
I mean, for the kids that are here, how should they look at race as they go on into this world? You know, because like you said, you want them to come into it on their own, but not.
Right. I mean, it's a challenge because, like, you know, you can see what happens that when you try to teach your child one thing, you see, then they're going to be faced with something different, and then you're going to have to teach them the other. It's like race is not something like I really deal with my child. It's just like, you know, I remember one day I was watching like I think it was UFC fighting, you know, sort of full contact sports, or it was boxing. I can't remember what it was. And so she says she says to me, you know, I want the brown guy to win. I said, well, why? She said, oh, because he looked like us. You know, now I don't know where that came from. You see, maybe she heard me talking about race or whatever, and she kind of thought, oh, well, there's this problem in the world. You see, whereas I know maybe a couple years ago she probably wouldn't have said anything like that. You know, I mean, so they children learn from us even when we try to ignore or try to insulate them from things. They pick up on it. You know, and actually just maybe a month ago. A study just came out. Don Lemon actually showed this on CNN. It was a study that a person that did a 1 year-long study about racism in America amongst children, you know, elementary school children, and they did the study to see how much children themselves have actually internalized sort of racial sentiment. And the studies kind of revealed a lot of things we really sort of would expect anyway. But like you're talking about children who are going to mixed schools. So of course, you're talking about school majority white schools, and then you have these minorities who are there, and particularly some African Americans. And so the children who are African American had a more positive sort of idea or stance about race, you know, relations, you know, and saw themselves as possible, always possible for them to, you know, be friends with children who were different colors and things like that. You know, of course, some of them, you know, were different, but most of them were like, yeah, sure, I can be friends, you know. But most of the white children, on the other hand, were different. You know, they were like, well, you know, no. You know, I said, well, why not? Because, well, mommy wouldn't want me to, you know, and not that and it wasn't as if the mothers or the father were telling the children don't hang it out, but it was enough. The children themselves observed that, well, I noticed that anytime I want to play with so-and-so, mommy pulls me away. Or when I want so-and-so to come over, mommy doesn't allow them to come over. You see? And so the children themselves, even if you're not teaching racism, you say, we should stop talking about race. You know, so you have people who are not talking about race, and their children are learning about it, you see, you know, on that sort of subconscious level, you know, because of their interaction, their experiences, you know, so you have to have the conversation eventually. And so it's just a matter of if we can help them to understand what is happening and what has happened to us, I think that, you know, we'll be on the right path, and hopefully a day can come when most people in the country and society will realize the futility to continue to talk about or to sort of ignore these type of problems, so that we can change a lot of the different policies and discriminatory policies that do exist in society.
I was watching Unsung with Sheila E. on it, and she was saying how she grew up in East Oakland, and her dad is the Dominican Republic or Cuba or something, but she was like, you know, when I was coming up, you know, I never considered myself Hispanic. I was black, because that was where she grew up. Right. So she went to black school, and it was a trip because when you were saying how your daughter is saying she was brown, right. I was like, everybody I know, their kids be like, we black. It don't matter.
No, she still says it. Right, exactly. She still says it. And I don't mess with her. I just ain't gonna let her have it. So, and I don't have a problem with people teaching their kids that say they're black either. You know? But it's just, I just think that
and all our kids
that if we don't
black box.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly. So it's just about teaching them the truth about all of it. And so what does it really mean? There's a history. There's a history. If it's just like I'm black, you know, we're not talking about race, we're not talking about slavery, we're not talking about how I became black, you know, and it's like, what's the point of it? Yeah, they have to know that. It's a very painful thing to teach them, but they have to know, how did I become this thing?
It's very important. That's what I think that, because any time that for me, if I consider myself black in the connotation that they use it, right, then I'm inferior to them. Right. You know. Right. So does nationality and race make you, you know, superior or, you know, inferior? Right. You know. So, you know, I deal with from that perspective. Right. You know, people want to know what your nationality is, but you know, my son, his mother is a Puerto Rican Spanish. Mm-hmm. And then her mother was, you know, the African slave trade was there. Mm-hmm. You know, right. Her mother was as dark as me. Right. You know, and her father was from Venezuela. Mm-hmm. Right. You see, so that type of thing. So sometimes I think that, you know, in one aspect you have to get away from it to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. You know, and deal with it right now. Right. You know, and I think Islam. I know Islam is the perfect tool for that. Right. Right. Exactly. And then we have to present it. Yeah, and we have to realize as Muslims that Islam encourages us to do this. Right. You know, but the biggest problem we've had to this point, in my opinion, is that Muslims, even more than non-Muslims, have shown resistance to these type of conversations. Say, why are we talking about race? Now we're Muslims, you know, there's no racism. Yeah, there's no racism in Islam as a religion, as a philosophy, as a theology. Yeah, you know, but people are racist. It's that people are drunkards and they're fornicators and they're thieves and, you know, they're racist, you know, people, you know. And so it's like if you were a racist yesterday, you're Muslim today, you're still probably a racist. You know, just a racist Muslim, that's all. So maybe a couple more questions and then we can let everybody go home.
Like what you were saying is like about earlier about what was it, like some people, it's they're white, they don't really prefer being around white people, but it doesn't mean they're self-hating. Mm-hmm. Like for example, I grew up in Arizona and like it's like a mixed black and Mexican neighborhood. So more than likely that, you know, when I was in 5th grade, we moved to a completely white neighborhood, but it's like
also segregate ourselves among them. And then I started thinking, because for Latinos, see, I'm from Nicaragua, and in Nicaragua there's a place called Bluefield, where the majority of all African descendants. And one of my aunts and some of my family members, they're blacker than you. And
I'm black.
so I started saying, people would be like, oh, right? But I started thinking and telling myself, man, we can't cross these lines. And as soon as you get to prison, it gets more deeper. Where you really can't even go over there. We can't even you can't even just hang out with them. You know, I mean, it's cool to give dabs here, you gotta keep it moving.
Natural segregation.
But what I'm trying, my point is, okay, yeah, we can't cross those lines, yeah, we can, talk or mingle together, but then at the same time, I'm like, wait a minute, let's look at our history. We are connected to them too, right? Again, that's that ignorance. And then I connected to the Muslims nowadays, because before I became Muslim, that's what I was being taught. Then as I became Muslim, I'm like, wow, mashallah, this is beautiful. We're all praying together, different race. You know, I'm praying next to a Chinese, an African American brother, and all types of race. But then, that wasn't the story. We start seeing, excuse me, I mean, I got respect for the Arab brothers, but some of the Arab brothers would be like, oh, brother, they start pointing fingers and, watch out for them and don't do this, do that. And I've seen that. I see it all the time. Racism is real big even within Muslims. But people want to it's just like, no, mashallah, no, have talk and, talk about deen and that, but wait a minute, we got bigger issues within our ummah. You know what I'm saying? And then our kids are growing up to see that. I don't want my son to go through that. You know what I'm saying? He's mixed. You know what I'm saying? He got a quarter Venezuelan, Puerto Rican, and then half is Nicaraguans. He's mixed.
You got 3 halves?
Both of my parents are from. Well, my point being is, you got some issues. And, I don't like to see it like that, but at the same time, people always want to keep their, issues in the closet. Never bring them out. So, I mean, I just...
And that's important, but and I think at the same time, we have to understand, too, that these conversations are not going to be easy. These are not going to be easy conversations, and some people will be very, very emotional, and we have to expect that those type of reactions, because these are very sensitive type of issues. I mean, this is one issue. We start talking about women, women's issues. That's another thing that he's dealing with. We're just dealing with race right now. The issue of relationship between men and women and power dynamics and things like that, which are appropriate, which are not appropriate, type of power dynamics. Those are things as well we need to eventually speak about. And so, but they're not easy conversations to have. And so that's one of the main reasons people don't want to have those conversations. But we have to continue to push the conversation so things can come out. And it's not going to be pretty all the time. It's not going to always be pretty. There's going to be some mudslinging, and it's going to be a little bit of that. But brothers and sisters, come back and calm down. Okay, I understand where that came from, but let's start over. Let's start over. So,
just real quick, just to end my discussion, we need to look how the Prophet dealt with these situations. Even among the Sahabas, they had Jahiliyyah. And I remember one of the Sahabas called other Sahabas, you son of a black man, right? And when the Prophet responded, he said, you still got Jahiliyyah, you need to let that go.
And this is Abdullah. Who was who's one the Prophet said of him, what it says in the hadith, that the heavens has not given shades to, nor has the earth carried anyone who is more honest and truthful in speech than Abdullah. So the Prophet praised Abdullah, and this is Abdullah, one of the pious people, you see. Who had a moment, it was like a weakness, and pretty much was what he was calling Bilal. You
pretty much what he was saying to him. You son of a black woman, you know, it's like calling NIG. That's pretty much what was happening. And, you know, the Prophet says to him, you know, that you have some jahiliyyah and you're still Abdullah. You know, work on that.
I heard it asked in a question way, but I just want to drive as much as tools as you can out of it. So, how is it, another example maybe, can we get out of the maze of, particularly us, maybe our kids in particular, having them try to define themselves in a society that's already defined them or people like that? And usually what happens, I know it's most African Americans, we end up going into the same rabbit hole by saying, okay, well, since society has already defined people like you, let me show a people like you who, you know, were scientists or, you know, we go into a better picture of people like you. It's still kind of like we're in the same rabbit hole.
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to what we talked about before, about Matthew Fry Jacobson said that, you know, that race is both a conception and a perception. It's like what the brother was talking about in prison, you know, and Latinos and their relationship with blacks. Again, Pharaoh, he stratified the population. If we know that much, you know, where did it come from? You know, you know, you're this, you're that. Someone else defined you, and they set you at odds with one another. Even though you're there's more about you as a light than is different. You see, you know, you have the same blood in your veins. You see that all white people got black blood in them, and black people got white blood in them, and everybody's mixed. You see, everybody's all mixed up. Right. So, but I mean, but those stories. See, this is where it's a challenge. Is that okay? Well, we don't want to reinforce the idea that we are this sort of genetically distinct type of people from Europeans. So, so our story needs to be told. Yes, it does need to be told. And so, you know, so yes, the person was black, that person was black, the person who did this and made this was black. Those things are, to me, are positive things. They're very positive things. But I think the place we want to be careful is that we don't teach them how you became black. You see, so if society deems you this way, then understand that there are other people like you who look like you, right, and who are deemed to be in the same category as you, that who are people who did great things, you know, and that is something that helps to increase a person's pride, you know. But on the other hand, I think that there's a difference between that and teaching your child that, okay, well, you're better than white people because of this. Just because of this, that you're better than white people, you know. And of course, it's difficult because even if you don't teach them that, sometimes they can perceive it that way. But it's every person's going to have to kind of deal with it, you know, and have those conversations. And you know, I think for children, it's good for us to emphasize, you know, listen, that's orange, right? That's white. You know, what the colors, those are, you know, you follow me? This is not black. It's not black. You follow me? Is it really black? You know, does it look like for sure? I mean, what colors really are. Now, the day will come, and they're gonna see on TV or people having conversations. What are you talking about? And then those will be those moments. Those times we need to have those conversations. You see, we have to then help them and guide them. You know, but I just think that when we do guide them, we guide them in a way that it doesn't turn into a sort of reverse type of racism. Where we start to teach them hate of other people, you know, even though it might be difficult for them not to feel some anger about what has happened. But again, they have to go through that. They have to go through it, you see. But everybody has to grow up. And so for the rest of our lives, we continue to struggle with those things. You know, but I think that ultimately, one day it may come where we all get together and work to raise awareness throughout the nation, and try to change a lot of things that contribute to those negative sort of stereotypes and the biases that do exist between certain people. You know. and maybe one is the one blasphemy ideas.
So you're saying Muslim first, then your race, know your lineage?
No, I don't think that there's a dichotomy between Muslim and your lineage. That we should stop putting those together with one another. It's not like Muslim, black. You know, that's two different. Am I a Muslim or am I black? No. You know, or I'm a Muslim or I'm American. You know, they're two different. They're not opposites. You know, one's a nationality. One is your religion. Right? You know, one is your religion. One is your sort of ethnic category classification. You know, it's okay if a person's an Arab, and they say I'm an Arab. A person's a Jew. I'm a Jew. You know, a person's African, or I'm a Nigerian. That's fine. You know, but it's not fine when it becomes a matter of like, you know what, I'm a Jew and I'm better than you just because I'm a Jew. You know, I'm better. That's when it becomes a problem, because Allah, He's the one who, again, He made people into peoples and tribes. And He caused that division. You know, and so the identification, you know, with the Arabs, you know, the Prophet was from Quraysh, right? He didn't have a problem with them.